look at your health as a challenge rather than a blockade. Look at your health as the way that your body's communicating with you and try to figure out why it's communicating with you in that way. If you can figure that out, then you're going to be able to treat it most effectively.
Welcome to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, the podcast for high achievers who want to stay sharp, focused, and full of energy despite their diagnosis. With your host, National Board Certified Functional Medicine Health Coach, Julie Michelson, where Julie helps you take your power back from autoimmunity. And now here's your host, Julie Michelson.
Welcome back to the Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast. I'm your host, Julie Houghton. In today's episode, I'm talking to Wendy Presant, a retired naturopathic doctor who reduced her Sjogren symptoms in just 2 weeks using the Autoimmune Protocol. In this conversation, you'll learn how to break the autoimmune cycle for your children and why only 30% of your risk is actually genetic. Wendy, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I'm very excited to talk to you today.
I am looking forward for listeners to get to know a little bit about your journey, and then we'll give them some amazing tips and tools. But you've been in what I would consider the kind of integrative, more natural healthcare space or healthcare in general for a fair amount of time. But how did you become such a leader in the Sjogren space?
When I was a naturopathic doctor, I'm retired from that now, I saw a lot of people with autoimmune conditions. And looking back, I honestly can't even remember if any of them had Sjogren's, but I treated for lots of other autoimmune conditions. I remember in naturopathic college, we came across the term Sjogren's, and it was, all I remembered from that was that it was a dry condition. That's all I remembered.
Mm-hmm.
And so the years went by and my life got really busy, and I got busy with moving across the country and caregiving. And I had some small symptoms. I'd had for years. So I had dry eyes since I was a teenager. I remember the optometrist telling me that I needed to blink more. Mm. And I thought that's really strange, and then didn't do anything else around that for quite a while.
Sure.
And then I can also remember profound fatigue when I was in my mid-30s. And I had a young child, and I remember going to the doctor with this profound fatigue. And the doctor ran the standard blood work. And she said, well, there's nothing wrong with your blood work. I said, well, why am I so tired then? She said, well, I have no idea. And the conversation ended at that point. And I said, well, then, do you have the name of a psychologist I can see? Because I thought, if she's not finding anything physical, it must be mental. And she actually said, well, no, I don't really have any resources. So I just thought, okay, I guess I just deal with this on my own. And I went home. And when I made that trip across the country, I was driving. It was going to be a space of about 4 days. And I hadn't done a lot of driving. So I told my daughter, I said, okay, your primary job is to keep me awake on this trip. Mm-hmm. So she put together a playlist, and she read to me. She did an excellent job. And I managed to stay awake through that long, scary drive. But the fatigue had been there for quite a long time.
Sure.
And then I arrived where I was going, and life seemed to get more intense. I picked up caregiving for my parents, and that was a whole involved process over the next couple of years. And then my eyes were driving me up the wall. I was feeling exhausted. I was feeling anxious. And my eyes were so dry. I just wanted to rip them out of my head. So I'd been working with an optometrist, and I went to her and I said, my eyes are driving me nuts. They're so dry. My mouth is so dry, and I'm tired all the time, and I'm really getting kind of anxious and depressed. And she said, well, do you mind if I write a referral to your family doctor because I think you might have Sjogren's. And I thought, oh, Sjogren's. Okay.
I've heard of that.
That dry disease that I heard of in my past can't be that bad. So anyway, long story short, she wrote a letter to my medical doctor. The medical doctor was very good. She not only ordered the standard blood work, she also ordered blood work for inflammation. And she also ordered a couple of specific Sjogren's antibody tests. And kind of fortunately for me, because people can have Sjogren's and have antibody tests come back just fine, but mine were not fine. And it was really obvious that it was Sjogren's. She sent me to a rheumatologist. I got the official diagnosis from the rheumatologist. And at that point, I thought, okay, well, I was a naturopathic doctor. I know how to handle this. And I had to wait between seeing my medical doctor, the rheumatologist. I had 6 months because that's kind of standard in Canada where you have a long wait for a specialist. So I thought, okay, this is great. I'm glad I have this time. I'm glad that we're suspecting it's Sjogren's. Now I'll go to the library. I'll get some books out of the library and I'll think about what I used to do for people with autoimmune disease. And I betcha I've got it well under control by the time I see the rheumatologist. So I went to the public library. And my goodness, I think I found one book. This was our main library. We live in a moderate-sized city, medium-sized city. I found one book on Sjogren's. It was old. It only talked about the medical approach. And I was so disappointed. And I went on to Amazon and I looked for books on Sjogren's. I couldn't find anything that really dealt with what I was looking for, what I could do to help myself along this journey. So then I thought, okay, well, I'd like to start with doing an elimination diet. I'd done that in the past.
Nice.
I think every naturopathic doctor has done an elimination diet at some point in their career. And I knew that gluten and dairy were problems for me. But I went through it anyway. So I actually joined the autoimmune paleo group and I started to work with that. And then I actually picked it up as a coach because what I found was that in 2 weeks after starting the Autoimmune Protocol, my symptoms were getting considerably better.
Amazing.
Even though I was still under a lot of stress at home.
Right.
The dry eyes were a bit better. The dry mouth was better. I was feeling less anxious. And then over time, things just kept on improving. So at that point, I thought, okay, I've got to be coaching in this sphere, working with people, giving them some hope. And I decided to write the book that I wish I had found when I initially went to the library. So that's what I managed to get out last fall.
Which is amazing. That's what we do, right?
Yeah,
that we create what we needed to serve others.
Yes.
And I want to highlight, I love that for listeners, to me, like the part that jumps out the absolute most in your story is that you didn't need to have everything perfect in order to start getting that needle to move and know that the inflammation was starting to go down. And I think it's really, really important. And I've worked with, as also an AIP coach, I've worked with many people who did the elimination diet and didn't get, a quick improvement like that. I was one of those people back in the day before I found AIP. I don't even know if AIP was the thing yet, but as I did my own elimination diet, my needle moved. And knowing what I know now and knowing my medical history, like I wouldn't expect it to. I had such a toxic burden and so many other things going on, including the stressors. And so it is such a good reminder that we just need to find that, like, because as you get more energy and get more resilient, we can then take on some of those other changes. And so I love that you got that kind of quick. It's because you're supposed to be here, right? You were supposed to write the book and you're supposed to be guiding people and reclaiming. So what is Sjogren's?
Yeah, it's a strange word, isn't it? It's got an S and then a J after the S, which sounds very strange when you pronounce it Sjogren's. So Sjogren's is a condition that was identified by an optometrist, or an ophthalmologist, pardon me, back in 1930 named Henry Sjogren. And actually, he wasn't the only one. It's just that he's been given the credit. There were other doctors at the time. And what he noticed was he was getting these middle-aged female patients coming in, and they were complaining of very dry eye, but also dry mouth and joint pain. And he had enough cases like that he put together it as a triad, and he called it a syndrome, a Sika syndrome, which was dry syndrome. And this began to get picked up in the medical field, that women had this, and it wasn't actually recognized as an autoimmune disease until the 1960s. And that's really a shame, because somehow, even though the 60s are quite a long time ago now, it's still in some of the literature or in some of the training that professionals receive, that Sjogren's used to be called syndrome. Now it's called disease. That changed too in the last couple of years. It's actually a very profound autoimmune disease. If you think of rheumatoid arthritis, Sjogren's, and systemic lupus erythematosus, those three are all cousins. They are in the same family, the arthritic autoimmune diseases. Number 1 is rheumatoid arthritis. Number 2 is Sjogren's, and number 3 is lupus. But what have you heard the most about rheumatoid arthritis and lupus? Not as much recognition for Sjogren's, not nearly as much in the way of evidence-based studies. The drugs that are currently used in Sjogren's are borrowed from rheumatoid arthritis and lupus.
Sure.
So it has been a disease that we've really had to advocate for. And the Sjogren's Foundation in the United States and the Canadian or the Sjogren's Society of Canada, they have really advocated to try to bring it to people's awareness. And the other issue is that most people, not all, because men and children can certainly also get Sjogren's, and they're finding more cases all the time. But most of the patients are women between the ages of 40 and 60, right around menopause. So if you go to your medical doctor and you say, gee, I have dry eyes or dry mouth, or I'm tired, they might say, gee, it's menopause. And unless they actually do some of the further testing, you may remain untreated for quite some time. So it's something to keep in mind. You do need more than just the dry eyes. But if you are noticing, if fatigue is so prevalent, it's not considered part of the triad, but it's so prevalent. If you're extremely tired, I mean, there's likely something going on in the autoimmune field. And the other confusing thing with Sjogren's is that it can have overlapping symptoms with rheumatoid arthritis and with lupus. And a lot of the biomarkers, so a lot of the blood work, can be very similar. So it really takes a rheumatologist to puzzle out what's going on. The other complicating factor is you can have more than one autoimmune disease.
Sure.
1 out of 3 people has more than one autoimmune disease. You could be diagnosed for the first time and you have 2 or you have 3 autoimmune diseases. So there's a lot that goes into this. Yeah. And I forget what the original question was now, so.
I wanted to kind of, understand a little bit of that history and I want listeners to familiarize themselves because, before I was diagnosed with Sjogren's, I was told, and again, that's where when people show up at my door, like sometimes the labels aren't helpful. They are in the Western medical, diagnosis treatment. But like you said, the overlapping symptoms or the multiple diagnoses and I'm curious, I think I know what you're going to say. For me, the approach is the same. We go after the underlying factors, no matter how many or what label but dry eye, anybody with systemic chronic inflammation can experience dry eye. Yes. And so kind of parsing out, I was originally told like, yeah, well, it's related to the RA until it wasn't.
Yes.
Yeah, and even my rheumatologist at the time, kind of just waved it. Like I was already on all the medications; they weren't working, but I was already on, you name a class of medication they use for autoimmunity, and I was on one of each at the time. And so she was like, here's another diagnosis for you, but no change in anything. Other than, again, which I was already, keeping eyes moist and more regular visits with my eye doctor, right? I had, I was watched a little closer, but so I want to circle back to, we won't deep dive because we're not going to get into hormones, but I do want to highlight this kind of common menopausal, postmenopausal onset, which any major hormone change, I can't think of a reason medically why simply chalking something up to menopause, would cause dry eye, dry mouth. Like the menopause alone should not cause chronic discomfort. What? That's not.
No.
Yeah.
No.
And so I just want to highlight it. It is perimenopause. Menopause is such a common time for women to pop up with an autoimmune disease that, like you, maybe, most of us has been brewing under there, but we, normalized it, or, it was tolerable until it wasn't. So that doesn't surprise me. But I do want to talk a little bit about, speaking of the getting underneath it. I didn't let you answer verbally. Is your approach when you're working with people different depending on whether they have more than one diagnosis, or are you just kind of going after all the same lifestyle stuff?
I certainly want to know the diagnosis when people come. I certainly have the medical background. The scope I'm working in right now is in a coaching sphere. And so I don't order tests, but I certainly know which tests could be helpful for a person. So if they haven't had any testing done yet, I will advise them to work with an naturopathic doctor or a functional medicine doctor, and take looks at some of the things that may be impacting their Sjogren's. So first of all, one thing to do is to remove any guilt over why you have an autoimmune disease.
Right. Yeah.
30% of the reason you have it is genetic. So you can't do anything about your genes. And then the rest of that percent, 70%, is due to both the environment that you're living in and that you have lived in, and also triggers. So if you are living in a city with a lot of pollution, or you're living in a place with a lot of mold, you have a history of some major viruses going on. So maybe Epstein-Barr virus, something along that line. And then there's a trigger. So for me, one of the triggers was the huge increase in stress in my change in lifestyle. And that can then start, or it can at least bring to the surface, because yes, likely it has been brewing for some time, the process of autoimmune disease. Some interesting things to know about autoimmune disease too is that we always talk about that gut. Everyone's heard of the gut microbiome, right? The gut, leaky gut affects autoimmune. Yes, it does. Now, what's really interesting though is that we have microbiomes all over our body. So we actually have an eye microbiome, we have a mouth microbiome, we have skin microbiomes, and these microbiomes communicate with the gut. The gut is 70% of our immune system. So if the gut is messed up, the eyes are going to be messed up, the mouth is going to be messed up, the skin is going to be yucky. So we need to get that gut in control. How do we know if it's leaky? We don't, unless it's tested. But we do know if you have autoimmune disease, you have a leaky gut. And that's some of the research from Sarah Ballantyne. She was, I just loved her book, was all about autoimmune conditions. So you know you have leaky gut. really important. Then we look at our little cells, and each little cell has a factory in it called the mitochondria. And the mitochondria can only work properly to produce energy for you if you're giving it the right nutrients. So this is what I love. I'm really a big focus on nutrition, on getting those nutrients in, giving the body the building blocks it needs to produce the energy. So super, super important. So those are things to consider that a rheumatologist won't bring up.
Right. Yeah. And I love that you highlight, people hear AIP or elimination diet, and almost the first question when people realize they need to change lifestyle is like, what do I need to avoid? So I want to talk a little bit about the importance of the right nutrients and people, that misunderstanding that AIP is an elimination diet. It's not. It's a full framework.
Oh, yes. And this is
what you're missing and lacking is so important.
It's really frustrating because the message hasn't really gotten out there. What people tend to do with autoimmune disease is they go on an elimination diet and they think, I still have some symptoms, so I better eliminate the histamines now. Oh, I better grab the oxalates and kick them out. Oh, it might be the nitrates. And pretty soon, what are they eating? Maybe water and celery and white rice or something.
And
it's terrible. It's depleting them of more.
If they haven't healed their leaky gut, like I've had so many people come in eating seemingly healthy, but because they had leaky gut the whole time, now they've got sensitivities to the healthy veggies or but I know that that's a really important piece that you talk about in the book and work with people is adding in those nutrients. It's one of the first places you start, I think.
Yes, a big focus on that. It's actually really interesting because when I was a naturopathic doctor, I did do quite a bit of testing. I didn't initially, and then I studied functional medicine, and then I added in quite a few of the tests, and I found them really helpful. It meant that we could work much more quickly with people when they came in because we could identify where the key issues were and treat that. Here's something interesting, though. So these tests were expensive, and as I said, it would really, we could figure out the problem quickly, we could address it quickly. But I also had my patients who I had had for a long time, a couple of years, 2 or 3 years, when I wasn't using any testing. So they came in and I was all excited and I said, oh, okay, let's run this test on you and just see what we've missed all these years. I did this a few times and I realized that I wasn't picking up nearly as much with my old patients as I was with my new patients.
Sure.
And I thought, well, isn't that interesting? My old patients have been through my whole thing with diet and lifestyle, and they've improved their bodies. Their bodies have already healed.
Yes.
So, but the testing...
So pat yourself on the back.
Yeah, well... The testing,
the whole point is that the body can heal.
Yeah, a real shortcut. And I had a significant number of people who, if they'd had the testing in the beginning, would have been more likely to follow through on our protocols because they would have had something objective.
Yes, I call it the buy-in.
Learned, so much since then. So in every aspect, but it just brought home to me how important good nutrition was, how important moving your body is, and sleep, and those real basic things that I learned about a long time ago. And then, there are vitamin and mineral deficiencies with Sjogren's, as there are with all autoimmune diseases. And people are like, well, how do I know what I'm deficient in? Maybe I should just take a whole lot of supplements of everything. Because if I Google Sjogren's nutrient deficiencies, there's a list now, a huge list. So I'll take this and that. And this person said that this herbal formula for Sjogren's worked really well, got rid of their symptoms. And maybe I should throw that in too. There's a lot of desperation, like there is around cancer, when somebody has autoimmune disease. And there's so many people online who are some of them are genuinely trying to help, but
Sure.
we're all individuals. So
Yes.
a formula for Sjogren's might help some of the people taking it, but it might not help. And maybe for you, if you're on other medications or you have other health conditions, maybe that formula is even going to harm you too. So you need to work with somebody to help guide you. As I say, if you can work with a naturopathic doctor or functional medicine doctor, at least have your basic team with your rheumatologist, your ophthalmologist, your dentist. I mean, those are your three basic people that you absolutely have to have. And then add into your team people that can help you in addition to that. And there are some ways to help you figure out what your nutrient deficiencies are. And I got really excited because I started looking at the nutrient deficiencies in Sjogren's and I saw, hey, wait a minute. A lot of these are the very symptoms that we have with Sjogren's. So if you have a deficiency of omega-3s or vitamin A, you can have dry eyes. You can have a brain that gets kind of foggy and doesn't work properly. If you have a deficiency of vitamin D, you can get some of that joint pain going on. You can get that low mood going on. And I thought, isn't that cool? How much can we influence the disease by fixing up our nutrition?
It's so true. And we call those foundational, like at the clinic, people come in and there's a lot of fun buzz around peptides and this and that, all the fancy, shiny stuff. And it's like, well, your vitamin D is in the toilet or your omega-3s are low, or maybe your omega-3s are fine, but your 6s are really high. So your ratios are no good. And that's inflammatory. Like there's so many things like that are so good for everyone. And I'm not telling everybody to run out and get the supplements we just talked about. People ask me all the time, vitamin D, we now know, I think, post 2020, it's no longer, nobody's afraid of vitamin D anymore. We understand how important it is. Certainly in the autoimmune world, we have understood for a long time how important it is. And I love that you highlight that, low vitamin D can impact mood. Like we're integrated human beings. Like things aren't in little compartments. But I always say, there are like vitamin D is fat soluble. I don't know what dose you should be on if you need it at all. Right. So, there are certain things that it's important to know your levels and follow things. But yes. It does make so much sense when you think of it that way, right? Like I just said to somebody yesterday who was complaining like they were feeling like itchy and dry, and we're in Colorado, so it's dry here, but we're getting more like summer weather than winter, so it's certainly not cold.
Lucky you.
And my first two questions were, are you drinking enough water, and have you been taking your omegas? Because like we know,
dehydration is huge for Sjogren's. That's why I've got my water here and I sip on it periodically.
And me too. And it's huge just for we're here because of our autoimmune journeys, and we know, that it can be a different cycle. We talked a little bit before we hit record, that we want to break the cycle of people feeling like an autoimmune diagnosis is, the sky is falling and it's a gloom and doom. And which is certainly what I was. Not only did I feel that way when I was diagnosed, I was told that by rheumatologists, so we want to change that conversation for sure. Yes. But also these are things that are just health supporting.
Yes.
Period. People get frustrated when I say, well, the same things I'm looking at if I'm working with somebody with Alzheimer's, it's what I'm looking at for autoimmune or metabolic disease. Like, it's just how do we stay well or reclaim our health and protect it. And so I love that you highlight, because some of this stuff is so basic, and it's like, well, don't jump to the fancy herbal blends or the potions or until like if you haven't started with the foundational stuff.
Exactly.
So I love that. Tell us a little bit about the book and what listeners can expect if they are smart enough to pick up a copy of Dry, A Holistic Guide to Sjogren's Disease.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah.
So the book is, first of all, it comes in hardcover, softcover, and audiobook. And it's available at most of the online resellers. It's published by Frisian Press. And the book, it goes through, first of all, the history. It goes through the diagnosis. It gives you lists of questions to ask the different health professionals you're dealing with. I take an approach where I'm telling you things you can do on your own. I'm stressing which things to be careful with, to check in with your healthcare team to make sure you're not inadvertently causing yourself any harm. And I give you tools. So it is a way that the body's communicating with you. I say in my book that my body wasn't listening to the whispers. I wasn't listening to the whispers that my body was giving me. So it had to start screaming. It had to produce more and more radical symptoms. I needed to figure out to rest myself. I needed to figure out to not try to be helping everybody with everything all the time and to take on so much responsibility and all that kind of stuff. So I needed to focus on that because my body was just not able to maintain that homeostasis, that steady state anymore. So the book will go through as well. I talk about a couple of analogies which are really useful. I talk about a spider and a spider web. So if you think of Sjogren's as the spider, that spider is always going to be there. But then if you consider that each strand of the web is a different lifestyle factor, what you can do is you can weaken the web, and that weakens the spider. If you continue on, and I don't think any of us do this, but if you try to stay up all night, like maybe we did in our 20s, or you try to drink all night, or you're just kind of in party mood all the time, your body is not going to thrive under those conditions. And that Sjogren's is going to flare up and it's going to get worse. In a much more milder extent, just stressful events. And we get to recognize those. We can prepare for them to some extent. One of the most important things I like to tell women too is learn about what you can do for lifestyle factors to help protect your children, because unfortunately, our children have an increased risk of autoimmune disease of any kind because we have the genes.
Yeah. But this is the beautiful part. This is
the beautiful part.
Because we can change that trajectory.
We can change it.
Yeah.
Well, they may never suffer from an autoimmune disease if they are able to maintain that good environment, and if they do suffer from some sort of a trigger type event, if that could be dealt with quickly. So that's why it's kind of important. And I give an analogy in the book too about a college student, and you can't always protect and prevent, but you can teach and you can provide that high nutrient diet to your kids, and you can stress, early bedtimes and calm houses and how to meditate and all this type of thing. One thing I have too is you can get such a head start with simple things. Things like breathing, things like moving a little bit more. No doctor is going to say to you, "Oh, don't breathe. It could be dangerous for your health." You can,
Across the board, that's good for everybody.
You can breathe. You can meditate. You can walk. Almost everybody. Some people can't walk. Yes, but if you can walk, then start walking. Little changes done consistently are what affects this disease.
Yes.
If you try to do a whole bunch of stuff overnight,
you
are just probably going to flare, and you're going to say, "Oh, I can't ever move again. I did too much." So the book will walk you through. It's a very kind book. It talks about how you with your mindset, how can you still socialize with other people? How can you follow your dreams? And then doing for yourself. One thing that's really cool is with your food, and I'm not talking supplements, I'm just talking food here. if you go to some site like Chronometer Online, which is as a free version, and you just type in everything you're eating for 2 weeks. Don't change your diet, just type everything you're eating for 2 weeks. And then see what your common deficiencies are. And this is awesome because we can't actually do blood tests for all of our different deficiencies. Some we can, like iron we can for B12, but some of them, this is just sort of a really simple way. And then I did this and it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not really drinking dairy and my calcium is pretty low. So I better look for some of those foods that will enhance my calcium.
Gotcha.
Zinc. Oh my goodness, I'm not getting enough zinc. So that's just the easy things that you can do. And it's not to get discouraged.
Yeah. It's a great tool. I always say awareness is the first step to creating change. And so that's a level of awareness. I think even people logging their food right away, that starts to heighten some awareness too.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's really, and for some people it's a stress trigger. So for you, don't do that.
Exactly. If you've had an eating disorder, or you're just so exhausted that you can't do that, then you might take a different approach. You might just say to yourself, well, I'm gonna eat one more vegetable each day. Yeah. And because I know my diet's a little low in vegetables, or I'm going to make sure I've got some protein in each meal. And that's fine too, because we all are individuals. I can't stress that enough. The conventional medical system, unfortunately, does not look at individuals. It looks at the disease, and it looks at what treatments will affect the majority of people with that disease. And that can all be, very helpful. I'm not against conventional medicine. Those drugs have saved people's lives and really helped them along. But what we can do for ourselves, and then working with practitioners. I worked with a naturopathic doctor, a chiropractor, physio. I've worked with these different people who are still regulated, but they're not sort of what you think of as the conventional group to treat something like Sjogren's. But there's a lot of help out there. And then, as I say, you'll see some amazing benefits if you can hook up with someone who has studied the body in the kind of detail that a naturopathic doctor or functional medicine doctor has. And if you hook up with someone like a autoimmune protocol coach or functional medicine coach, they can certainly steer you in the right direction.
Absolutely. And it's about creating the right team for you. I tell people all the time too, like if you have a provider that you're not aligned with, get another provider.
Definitely.
You need to be supported in the journey. My husband and I say all the time, he's a functional medicine physician and he's the what to do, but sometimes people need the you and the me with the how to do it, right? So what does that look like? And so really, really important to create that team that's, again, individualized for you.
Yes.
You've already given us so many fantastic ideas and tips. But listeners know I always ask for one step that they can take starting today to improve their health.
Look at your health as a challenge rather than a blockade. Look at your health as the way that your body's communicating with you and try to figure out why it's communicating with you in that way. If you can figure that out, then you're going to be able to treat it most effectively. So that's what I would encourage you to do. And I would say to people, don't Google your symptoms. But of course we all do, so there's no point in saying that. What I will say is please don't get discouraged. If you go to Sjogren's board, you're going to see people and they'll talk about all the terrible things that are happening to very doom and gloom. And yet it doesn't have to be that way. My rheumatologist, and this was a great thing, the rheumatologist said to me, I don't think that your symptoms are going to progress beyond what you're experiencing now. Oh, I thought, okay, great. Now, Is that truthful? I don't know, but I'm doing my best to keep things, and I'm only going to deal with things as they come up. And when they come up, then I'll deal with them if they come up. But it's important to keep that positive mindset. Our minds communicate with our bodies. Our guts communicate with our brains. So we really need to be sending ourselves positive messages. You can do this. You can handle this. You can take a little step toward helping your health and helping you feel better.
I love that. Such amazing advice. For people that are listening on the go and aren't going to check the notes, where is the best place to find you?
All right. So if you go to my website, so dryhelp.ca, that's where you'll find my book. That's the cover of the book. And I have a contact in there too. And if you're interested and you want to fill out that contact, I can send you a couple of freebies. So I have a caregiver's guide that I'd like to send you. And I also have the top 10 tips for productivity, which can help you to actually get a new habit established well. So I'd love to send those to you if you want to connect. And I can guarantee you I don't have this really annoying email list where I send you an email every week or anything close to that. But I'd love to connect and hear how your journey's going.
Amazing. Such great resources. I really highly recommend that listeners go to the website and check it out and take advantage of what a generous gift that you have.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thank you so much for sharing your not just your expertise, but your just really grounded, loving, positive approach to healing. And I hope lots of listeners check you out, get the book for sure. Dry, a holistic guide to Sjogren's disease. And Wendy, really, really appreciate your time today.
Well, Julie, thank you so much for having me. I'm glad to get these messages out to a large number of people. Okay, thank you.
For everyone listening, remember you can get those links and show notes by visiting inspiredliving.show. I hope you had a great time and enjoyed this episode as much as I did. I'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity. Did you enjoy this episode? Please like, share, and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to get a transcript of this and every other episode, just head on over to inspiredliving.show or click on the link in this episode's description. There, you can also find everything we discussed in this episode, including links and information about our guest. You can even send in your questions to be answered by Julie in a future episode. That's inspiredliving.show. Until next time, this is Julie Michelson's Inspired Living with Autoimmunity podcast, helping you take your power back.